yourself a little bit in what's going on here. So a child dies. Reish Lakish asks his assistant is named Yehuda bar Nachmani, to deliver some words of comfort to this family. So first of all, Reish Lakish himself doesn't bother to give any words of comfort to the family. And second, he sends his assistant to send words of comfort to the family. The assistant totally messes up and says the craziest thing ever. The assistant says to this family mourning the loss of a child, well, maybe the child was a sinner. So you can imagine this story that you're now about to read is in the context of that horrible moment in which a person does not say the right thing to another person who is in deep distress and deep stress. Now, Yehuda delivers those terrible words to the mourning family, and Reish Lakish says to him, you better do better than that. You better do a lot better. And now Reish Lakish is trying to calm everybody down after his assistant has said this terrible thing to his teacher, to his kid's teacher who have this loss. So now go with me to the text. And my question is, how do we talk to each other in times of panic and crisis? Or how don't we talk to each other in times of panic and crisis? So these are both from Masechet Ketubot, page 8b. The first one, Reish Lakish said to him, his assistant, Yehuda bar Nachmani, stand and say a statement with regard to those who comfort the mourners. So Reish Lakish, in trying to calm everybody down, says to his assistant, you know what? You're in a room full of people who have come to make a Shiva minyan here. Why don't you say something nice to them? Why don't you say something nice about the people who comfort people? Remember, Mr. Rogers, in a time of trouble, look for the helpers. So Reish Lakish says to his assistant, why don't you find something nice to say to the helpers? Because you certainly didn't say something nice to the mourners. Stand and say a statement with regard to those who comfort the mourners. I'll call them the helpers. He began and said, and forgive the male language, just translating directly. Our brothers, bestowers of loving kindness, sons of bestowers of loving kindness, who embrace the covenant of Abraham, our patriarch, as it is stated, for I know him that he will command his children to do righteousness and justice. Those who practice this, may God be kind to you, just as you've been kind to others. Blessed are you, Lord, who pays it forward. Now that who pays it forward is my translation, to be honest. But I want you to look a little bit with me at the Hebrew. So, Yehuda bar Nachmani says, blessed are all those who are, and you can see the Hebrew bolded in the text in front of you, gomlei chasidim. So those who practice gemilut chasidim. And he did not say, please notice, blessed are those who comfort the mourners. He doesn't say that. He says to those who comfort the mourners a much more general blessing. Blessed are those who do gemilut chasadim. Let's just remember what gemilut chasadim is. Gemilut chasadim is the third leg of what the world stands on. Al haTorah, va'al ha'avodah, va'al gemilut chasadim. What's gemilut chasadim that the world stands on? It's deeds of loving kindness. It is not tzedakah. It is not the same as tzedakah. And in fact, the Talmud later says gemilut chasadim is better than tzedakah. It's charity versus benevolence. And the Talmud later says, charity awaits the cry of distress, benevolence anticipates the cry of distress. Doing nice things anticipates the need to do nice things. Charity is reactive. Deeds of loving kindness is proactive. It's a beautiful thing to think about. So Yehuda bar Nachmani here says, blessed are all those who do gemilut chasadim. And then he ends with a made-up blessing. Baruch atah mishalem hagmul. This blessing, by the way, does not exist. You won't find it in a prayer book. You won't find it anywhere. We don't say it. And I'm suggesting that we now reintroduce this blessing for ourselves, because we are now trying, each one of us in our own way, to be practitioners of Gemilut Chasadim in everything we do, in the way we talk to people, in getting groceries for our neighbors, in checking in with people, in calling people, in staying away from people. We're practicing Gemilut Chasadim. With that as the context, I want to do the paragraph that's most relevant to us today, which is the next paragraph. So in Comforting the Mourners, we've talked about a way to bless all those who are the helpers and to be cognizant of the helpers and blessing them. And now look how this little section ends. It's so beautiful and so relevant for us. Reish Lakish said to him, so Reish Lakish is now saying to his assistant, Yehuda bar Nachmani, who has finally said the right thing, stand and say a statement with regard to the entire Jewish people. So if you're going to bless the helpers, he says, you got to bless everybody. And clearly, this is a time of distress. And look what Yehuda bar Nachmani says. He began and said, Master of the worlds, redeem and save, rescue and deliver your people Israel from the pestilence and from the sword and from spoil and from the blight and from the mildew, which here means moisture that destroys the crops, and from all types of afflictions that come upon us suddenly into the world. Before we call, you will respond. Blessed are you, Lord, who halts the plague. Baruch atah otzer hamagefa. Again, a blessing that doesn't exist anymore. We don't say it. It's not in our prayer books. And, of course, rabbis all over the world are noticing this blessing and saying, we got to say this blessing now, as we're experiencing a kind of a modern experience of some kind of a plague. I want to point out a couple of things about this Talmud that I think really touches us in asking how do we bless the helpers. First of all, you'll notice, if you know Hebrew, you go to the Hebrew words, that he prays for an end to dever. Okay, so he says, Padei v'hatzel amcha Yisrael min ha-dever umin ha-cherev. So dever, we know, guys, that's from the 10 plagues. That's the plague of pestilence that led to the death of all the animals of Egypt, and then eventually to the people. And save us, this is so relevant, it's almost like impossible to believe how relevant it is, to save us from the sword, umin ha-biza. And biza is what you do in a crisis when you break store windows and loot. And we've seen that in so many times in our history where people are forced into either situations of extreme distress and poverty, or where people are so bored that they can't stand it anymore, that there's an increase in looting in the world. And so Yehuda bar Nachmani is saying, keep us from the urge or the feeling or the actual experience of looting in the world. And then he continues to say, from anything that will keep our food supply from being compromised in any way as we get through this crisis. And then the last line is so beautiful. And from any kind of affliction, and I've bolded it out for you in the Hebrew, mikol minei por'aniyot hamitragshot uvaot laolam. That is taken directly from the traveler's prayer. This is what you say, Tfilat Haderech, if you go on a trip. Please, God, keep me from any sudden distress, any sudden affliction that might come upon me unexpectedly. And I don't know how many of us can say we knew about coronavirus, we knew it was going to happen, we knew it was going to spread this quickly, but most of us feel that this is Puraniyot HaMidragshot Uvaot Laolam, a sudden affliction that's come on us into the world, and we pray and we bless that we should be quickly relieved of it. I'm going to stop for just a moment here before I do the second half of text, which I want to close with. I'm going to take any questions from the side, from the chat bar. And Danny, let me know who has questions or comments.
Here's a couple
Okay.
comments. So from Nick and Julie, I noticed that the sword is in there with pestilence and the others.
So that great.
Is there a distinction between man-made and human plagues?
Oh, let me just go back to Nick's comment. It's a very important comment, Nick, and that is that the rabbis were afraid of exactly what happens in societies which get put under pressure and put into stress, which is that people will get violent, either with each other or with themselves. So that is the prayer against being met in a situation like this with the sword. Sorry, next question.
So from V, it says, since we all have to isolate, what will we do at Passover?
V, I'm going to answer that question not this morning, but I promise that I'm going to have a special study session on the most unusual Pesach of your life. So stand by. I promise that that's coming in the days to come. Is there a distinction between man-made and human plagues, you asked, Danny, right?
Well, that was the segue to Nick and Julie's question.
So there isn't a distinction in the Talmudic text. This Talmudic text, this prayer against plagues, doesn't differentiate between those kind of plagues. Let's take one more question.
From Aviva, no, not from Aviva, from Jill. Hold on, are there other interpretations of this?
Of this particular Talmudic text. This Talmudic text actually has been frozen in time, to be honest. This text has been frozen in time and it has not been used. Historically, what happens in a time of national crisis is that, or let's say communal crisis, is that the leaders of the community write special prayers. They're called tachanunim. They write special rituals for the community in a time of crisis. Usually they wait till after the crisis is over, and then they write prayers of thanksgiving. And I promise you that when this crisis is over, I am going to write a special prayer of thanksgiving for Toronto. We're going to do one more set of texts also that are uplifting to get us out of those more serious texts. So we've all been staying at home. My new hashtag, Tikkun Olam, stay at home. I know it doesn't quite rhyme, but it's I think it's working. So I want to give us some indications of how tradition really allows us to see our homes now as our sanctuaries. Now, you know, according to Jewish history and Jewish tradition, after the temple was destroyed, we were taught that your home becomes the mini temple. Mikdash Ma'at is your home. And this is a really beautiful and important concept for us to have, that we're not just staying at home. We're actually creating a place at home for these next days, weeks, however long, that is going to be a holy space. And that even this Zoom space that we've created is a holy space. And our texts really make it very clear to us that if we cannot be in the temple, whatever the temple means in a relevant way, then we need to make our homes into that temple. And how do we do that? So I want you to look at two very well-known texts. We've seen them before from Torah. The first one is from Exodus 25:8. Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocham. Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Of course, the rabbis are going to notice. It doesn't say, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in it. It says, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in them. How is it possible to make God a sanctuary that God can dwell in them? That sanctuary has to be our heart. That sanctuary has to be ourselves. That sanctuary has to be where we are. God says, make me a sanctuary that I may dwell inside you. And the only way for us to do that is to do that not in buildings, but in ourselves, in the way we act and in the way we live. And the rabbis say to turn that into our homes. Now, that sounds easy, but we have to be assured that what we're doing, for example, what we're doing today, while it is not normative on Shabbat for us to have our service, our study online, that there is a sense even of holiness in that. So look at what Sforno says. Sforno was a medieval Italian commentator, and I love what he says. He says, I will dwell among them. He's commenting on that piece of the line. In order to receive their prayers and their sacrificial offerings, in the same way I displayed my presence at the mountain. Ba'oto ha'ofen sha'ani mar'eh otcha shchinati bahar. The same way that I was on Mount Sinai and I revealed myself, I will also be there wherever you are, wherever you offer your prayers, wherever you practice your rituals. And it's not just that God saying, I will be there. It is God saying, I will be there the way I was at Sinai. That's a huge thing. I will be there the way I was at Sinai, not a small way. Not, oh yeah, if you just feel like I'm there. But I'm promising you that when you make this holy space within yourself, I will be there in as big of a way as I was on Sinai. And let's relate to another verse in Exodus 20:21. In every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. Which is a very outstanding statement for us to know that we are blessed in what we are doing in these days at home. We are blessed when we come together, even in this most unusual way. And to add strength to that, the Ramban. In every place that they will remember God's name, God will come with the divine presence upon them to dwell among them and bless them. In every place where we are going to keep our Judaism alive, in every way that we're going to do this in our homes on technology, there's going to be a blessing for us. And so those are very uplifting texts, I think, in this time as we go forward. I'm going to end with a beautiful text from Martin Buber. I'm sure most of you know Martin Buber, I and Thou, most important book to talk about the theology of relationship. Basically, to be in one sentence, Martin Buber, the great Jewish philosopher, says you meet God when you meet other people. You see God when you see other people. And when you have real relationships with other people, real relationships, not utilitarian relationships, not where you're using them, but where you are really human on human, and you care about them as a human, not what they can do for you, but who they are, then you're able to have a relationship with God, only then and only then. So in his book, I and Thou, which, by the way, historically speaking, was written right after the Spanish influenza crisis, so you can see a real relevance in it, writes this very interesting and relevant piece of text for us. And it's kind of a reminder in these technological days of how to use this technology to keep ourselves upbeat, but also not to get overly fatigued by this constant use of technology, which is going to, triple and quadruple the normal use of it for us. Let me read this, and I want you to sit with it for a minute. It's philosophical, so it's not an easy text. To be sure, the individual can replace direct experience more and more with indirect experience, the acquisition of information. And he can abbreviate use more and more until it becomes specialized utilization. A continual improvement of capacity from generation to generation is nevertheless indispensable. This is what is usually meant when people speak of a progressive development of the life of the spirit. This certainly involves the linguistic sin against the spirit. For this life of the spirit is usually the obstacle that keeps man from living in the spirit. Let me unpack that just for a moment for you, and then I'd love to hear your comments. So Buber talks about the acquisition of knowledge as opposed to the attempt to retain connection. And among the rabbis who have been on 5 webinars a day for the last couple of days, We have been speaking a lot about the outpouring of resources and offerings. You could be on your computer all day long at concerts, at classes, in museums, Torah study, with your synagogue. And we are counseling people to see these opportunities not as the acquisition of information, but as an opportunity to connect. So this is why we're going into small groups in a moment. This is why we're going to talk about these texts in small groups in a moment, because it will be easy for us to amass information over the next few weeks and be on information overload. And what Buber is saying is see all these offerings, see all this information as a chance for human connection. What he means by the abbreviated use to utilization is where we no longer are in a thing, but we use the experience. That is, for example, we're not really studying at this moment. We're just filling our time, saying, look, I got nothing to do on a Saturday morning. I'm going to go in there anyway, right? To see these opportunities as filling time rather than really putting the self totally in the experience. That's the difference between use and utilization that he warns us against. The third thing I want to point out is this fabulous line at the end, that this linguistic, this lingo, life of the spirit is the obstacle that keeps us from living in the spirit. In our lust, in a sense, to amass experience, we actually miss a lot of experiences. This new notion, for example, of pursuing spirituality. Where can I find a spiritual experience online over the next few days? Can prevent us from actually having a spiritual experience. The pursuit of that stands in the way from the actual experience of it. So this is a lesson, I think, for us, a spiritual lesson for us, I think, for the coming week, to slow down our pace of online meetings and experiences, to avoid screen burnout, to avoid overloading ourselves with news and online webinars and live stream this and live stream that, to the point where we are not experiencing anything but just watching it. So look for interactive experiences, look for experiences that will uplift you, but also let's be careful where we're not just passively amassing experiences. That is Martin Buber's, I think, very important Torah, Corona Torah for us for this week. I will be happy to take comments, questions. Danny, let's hear from people, and then we'll have a song, and then we'll go into small chat rooms for a couple of minutes.
Yashar Koach, Rabbi.
Thank you.